Hello there everybody, how's it going and how have you been? Welcome back to SpaceChem for the last time, at least until I decide to start experimenting with live streaming and using the ResearchNet as a test bed. So this is kind of the final episode for now, so maybe I wouldn't say the series is over so much as going on a very long hiatus. Now, through this whole series, through the story, the Mustachium levels, and the 63 Corfu DLC, and even into the beginning of ResearchNet, I've been showing you guys how to solve these levels. So I think a very good way to put the series onto its long hiatus is to show you guys how to make your own levels. So when you click the Create or Import an Assignment button down there when you go into ResearchNet, it takes you to this menu. I will be getting to importing assignments in just a little bit, but for the most part you're probably going to be clicking one of these three buttons: New Research, New Production, or New Sandbox. Sandbox levels are strange. They're very different from Research and Production levels. Basically, when you click Edit, you are given two input zones, whatever these P1, P7, P1 through P8 areas are. I honestly don't really know how to edit a sandbox level, primarily because I've never really made a sandbox level. But I believe the purpose of sandbox levels is to just give you a space where you can play around with commands and logic and just experiment, toy with it, you know, see what you can basically accomplish with them. Now, because I'm not very familiar with them, and because they are very much a kind of personal experimental playground, I'm not covering them. That's as far as I'm going to go. Instead, I'm going to concern myself with creating your own research and production levels. So let's start with research. Now, a quick note is that if you double-click on any puzzle from this list, it will open the level as though you were trying to play and solve it. If you want to edit it, you have to just select it with a single click and then hit this edit command. Now, for research levels, you are now presented with a menu like this. You can change the puzzle name to whatever you want. You can't actually jump to the middle of it. You have to delete from the back forward. So I'll just call it that. You can change the author name, so by default it uses the profile name. However, if your profile name is your actual real name and you don't want that getting sent off with your levels, you can change it right here to a pseudonym. Now, these are nice, but for the most part you're going to be concerning yourself with the rest of the screen. Over here you change the inputs, over here you set the outputs, and here you determine the tools the player is allowed to use. So how about we just go from left to right. So for the inputs, you edit them. You're presented with three areas in which you can design the molecules that are the inputs for the level. Now, there are a couple things to note. The first is that each input can only have up to 3 molecules that come in, so you can't go super crazy, random, and complex with this. And while you can create your own molecules, so pretty much anything you can think up, so long as it fits in the 4x4 square, you can use as an input. One thing you cannot do is have atoms freely floating, or basically all the atoms in one of these 4x4 squares, they all have to be bonded together. You can't try and, you know, cheat in multiple molecules in one area. They all have to be connected to one another. Now, if you're not particularly creative with your molecules, the game does have a nice big list of pre-built stuff for you to play around with. And you just simply pick one, and it loads it in for you. It spells it out, it writes down the chemical formula, and There you go. If you, backtracking a little bit, if you want to build your own molecules, but you don't see one of the atoms you want to use on this little shorthand list, you can select anything you want from the periodic table by hitting that select element button. Now, you can't use the 4 Greek symbols from the end of the story mode, and I find that a little strange because I know there are some levels in ResearchNet that do use them, so I'm not entirely sure how the creators managed to gain access to these weird elements, but there's some way to do it. I don't know what it is, though. Lastly, if you do have multiple kinds of molecules coming in from one input, you can change the ratio between them by using the slider down here. So you can go anywhere from even split to 92% one, 8% the other, and likewise, it works for all 3. Although this time you can change the ratios of them independently. So you can create, when you have mixed inputs, there we go, you can define pretty, I keep forgetting the sentence. When you make a mixed input, you can really control pretty much everything about it. There we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and clear these just to not, or just to have a nice simple input. You can add an input to beta if you want. You can have beta inputting stuff but nothing coming in from alpha. You can have stuff coming in from both. I do suggest you have at least one input making something, because otherwise your level is pretty much unbeatable. And that actually leads me to a quick thing. I never submitted a level to ResearchNet, and I don't know if it's still accepting levels. But I'm pretty sure that if you wanted to, you had to actually complete the level yourself to prove that it was solvable before it would let you upload it. Now, I don't know if that applies to any fan sites that might exist. I'm pretty sure there is, like, SpaceChem's official site actually has like a share page as well for your own custom puzzles. I'm not sure if you have to prove that the level is beatable if you upload to there, so be wary if you collect levels from a site like that, but just a quick little tangent I wanted to run down. Editing outputs is very similar to your inputs, except you can only define one thing to come out of each, or to go into each output, because that's how the outputs work. You have to make only one specific thing. Now, one other thing is that the game will obviously automatically recognize any molecule you select from this list. Likewise, if you make just a single atom the output, it will recognize and automatically enter that information. However, that does not mean that those are the only things the game will automatically recognize. So, for example, if you wanted to make... Now, this is not quite an example, but say you wanted to make this one of your either an input or an output, it doesn't matter. The game doesn't know what that is, so you will have to manually enter whatever you want to call it. And I don't think you really have, well, I guess technically you don't have to change these, but it would be nice if these are at least accurate to your molecule, just to, you know, make it a little more aesthetically pleasing, I suppose. However, there are certain molecules not on the list that the game can recognize. So if I, as you saw, with every hydrogen I added, the game has a name and chemical formula for those, even though they are nowhere on this list. So Sometimes the game can fill in the blanks for you, but if it truly is your own fictional molecule, or just some molecule that the game just doesn't know about, because you can't expect the guy to code in every single known molecule to science, you will have to manually change these two fields. And really quick, actually, there we go, because I do plan on actually solving this level to show off a couple more other things. Now, as for the tools, one thing I forgot is if you want to change your research level to include a large output, like those levels that had us solve, or not solve, but build like long polymer chains, you just check that button, edit output psi, and you have a large area in which to define your big old molecule in. Now, as for the tools, every tool has a certain amount you can either, or has a certain amount you can set them to. By default, they are all disabled. Now, I do recommend at least giving them bonders. There are certain levels you may want to create where you don't need bonders, like maybe a kind of math-heavy level involving just the fusion and fission lasers, but for the most part, you'll probably want to give them a bonder. Now, I believe this is all I'm going to need to solve the level. So, if I click save and play, we're now given the basic game screen, and we can solve our level as though it were a level that, you know, already existed in the game. So, one thing I would like to do, and pretty sure this will work. I was thinking about this a little bit because, admittedly, this is not the first time I am recording this episode. I actually recorded this the previous night that I am... The old recording was one night ago. There we go. And I did not realize I accidentally hit the stop recording hotkey about halfway through. So when I was reviewing the footage, all of a sudden the episode just cut out. And I realized what happened, and I kind of facepalmed, because one, no, it's just a silly mistake, and two, that means that I'd have to re-record this episode, and as a result, it is now coming up a day later than I wanted it to. So we've got all this. And I believe that will solve this example level. So blue cuts off the NH2 pair or set, calls in the hydrogen atom and bonds it to them, carries it over to the output. Red moves the first CN pair out of the way, so this area is clear for the next molecule. Blue does the same thing. Red connects the two CN pairs to make the cyanogen and delivers it. So there you go. That's pretty much all there is to designing your own research levels. Let me actually hit speed forward just to finish this up now. Now there won't be any data available because obviously you're the only one with the levels, so you're the only data points that would ever exist for it. But now if we hit save and exit, you'll see that it's got a little check to show that we have solved it. One thing to be careful about with your really quick, I'm just going to duplicate it just so I can show you over. Oh no, this doesn't have it. Can I like copy an entire? I think I can. No, I can't. Okay. one thing to note is that if you have a solution, even if you just accidentally open this play area and didn't mean to and haven't laid down a single command, if you try and change any setting, so say I give it a sensor now, if I hit save and play, the game will say that you have changed one of the components and it conflicts with the solution that already exists. Now you have two options. You can either keep the changes and erase the solution, or keep the solution and not accept the changes. Now, even though my old solution never used a sensor because it didn't exist, adding a sensor invalidates that solution. It's a little weird, but it works. It's a little more understandable when it's something like if your solution has to use the fusion laser and then you disable the fusion laser, then obviously that solution is no longer valid because one of the components it has to use is no longer available. So when you are editing your research levels, just be a little bit careful if you start changing settings after trying to solve them. Unfortunately, there's no real way to get it to remember your solution and accept a change. So say I'm testing a level and I find that 4 bonders just isn't enough and I need to give it 8, it will still clear that solution, and consequently any work I have made towards figuring out a possible solution for it. So it's a little bit finicky, but you'll kind of get used to it with a little bit of practice. Now, as for your production levels, they work a little bit differently. We have 3 inputs and 3 outputs. You can choose what reactors the players use right here, and we can change a couple of other facets about our production level down here. Now, really quick. Unfortunately, you can't hold backspace. You do have to press it over and over and over again. I know, just to give it a nice, unique name. Now, the reactors you give the player determine what tools they use. So if you want them to have a sensor reactor or an atomic sensor, you have to enable the sensor reactor. If you want them to have fusion and fission lasers, you have to enable the nuclear reactor. So be a little worried about that. Now, down here, a couple important things. First off, the reactor quota, that is the amount of reactors the player is allowed to use, it starts at 0. I'm not 100% sure why. I think it's because there's that one tutorial level on CERN 4 where we're just getting used to dragging pipes around on the map, and it does not allow reactors at all. But you will definitely have to change this to make any puzzle of significant difficulty. Now, the good news is it can go from 1 all the way up to 6, so you can make your production levels really complicated if you want. Let's just leave it at 2, why not? Now, another thing is you can choose from any of the backgrounds of the story mode. Anything from CERN 4 all the way to Fleeteus. There is not any cool spaceship background like from the 63 Corgi DLC or the final boss level, which is a little sad because those do look kind of neat, but you do have a nice big selection. One thing to take note of, however, is that if you choose the Fleeteus map, it will always look like this. You will always have this plant mass over here. You will always have a plant mass over here. You can't move them, you can't add ones, you can't remove ones. If you want the background to be Fleeteus, it has to be this. And that applies to every possible map. There is no changing the terrain at all. Likewise, if I just pick, say, this guy, the cargo freighter for that will appear up here in the upper right. Now, these 3 outputs do kind of correspond to their rough position on the map. So if I just pick something quick and simple for Y and Z, and then I hit save and play, you'll see that the fluorine gas freighter, which was the Y output, is in the middle, and the chlorine gas freighter, which is the one at the bottom, is down here. You can't move these freighters either, and likewise, you can't move input tanks around either. They are stuck where they are. If you want them moved, you have to use one of these 3 preset fields. So I'm just going to I hit cancel. Just going to clear the both of these. Now, input A and input B are generally going to be down in the lower left corner of the maps. And, you know what, that's fine. Input R is going to be in the upper left part of the map, and R works a little bit differently. A and B can only have one molecule as an input. R can have up to 3, so R is going to be your mixed input tank if you want that. Of course, you don't have to. You could just give it, say, just one particular molecule, and that would be the only thing it gives. So if you want just 3 constant inputs, you can have 3 constant inputs. The point, however, is that you can have only 1 mixed input, so you can't go too crazy with the randomness. Trying to think if there is anything else I'm forgetting. Inputs, outputs. Oh, you can choose to include recyclers if you wish. You simply turn that on, and a recycler's there. Turn it off, and the recycler goes away. Simple enough. Likewise with the tanks and the freighters, you can't move your recycler around. One other thing to note is that there is no quantum reactor. Again, ResearchNet came with the game. 63 Corvi was DLC released afterwards. So, probably because of the fact that not everybody would buy the 63 Corvi DLC, that's probably the biggest reason why there was never an update to include quantum reactors in production, custom production assignments. So, be forewarned that if you want to make a custom production level, you can't use quantum tunnels. They simply don't exist in any of these other reactors. I think that should about cover the production editor. Now, how about I show you how to import and export your own levels. So to export, you simply select one, and then you hit the export button. And this crazy jumbled string of characters and numbers and symbols and complete computer gibberish is the key code that other copies of SpaceChem can read to recreate your level. Now don't worry, the game does not expect you to copy this by hand into an email or into a comment on another website. You can choose to upload and copy it to a specific URL, or you can copy the code to a clipboard and then paste it into a Microsoft Word document, an email, wherever you want to store it. So I'm just going to hit copy code to clipboard, and the game will take care of basically control-C'ing that whole list of gibberish. Now, if you hit import, the game will read whatever is currently in your computer's clipboard, and if it's available code, recreate the puzzle for you. So now if I hit import, we've got a duplicate of this puzzle. So when you want to import other levels, you will typically have to select the code from comment on a website, a friend's email, wherever it is. Then Control-C or right-click and choose copy, or however you want to, basically do the first half of a copy-paste function process. Then just hit the import button and the game takes care of it for you. It's actually very nice that it does this. Now, I believe the reason it does work this way is because SpaceChem, I'm pretty sure, actually predates the Steam Workshop, and even then, it is possible to buy this game not on Steam. As weird as that is, as weird of a sentence structure as that is, you don't have to. It's not only on Steam. There are, I believe it's Good Old Games, where you can also buy a copy of SpaceChem. And, you know, if you buy your copy of SpaceChem over there, you know, having Steam Workshop functionality isn't going to be very helpful when it's not running in Steam. So, there you go. A little strange and a little wonky, but that's just how the game works. So, now one thing I do want to mention is that this is more or less supposed to be a quick start guide, I suppose. Mostly just kind of, if I hit edit again, mostly going over what all these do and just quickly explaining everything so that you don't have to fumble around figuring out what does what. Especially for production levels, because they can be a little bit confusing the first time. But there is a fair amount of, shall I say, nuance to making your own levels that you kind of have to learn on your own. You really can't teach it to somebody else through a video. You really have to kind of learn it on your own, or have somebody there next to you kind of guiding you along. And in fact, I will go ahead and show you guys. I switch my profile back to my actual personal one. I have designed a couple of levels myself. So, how about I show you guys this one? So, this is one I made many, many years ago. Just something I wanted to do just because. But you have copper 2 oxide and a custom molecule that I called scrap tin. And from those you have to make a bronze metal, a atom of titanium dioxide, and an atom of oxygen, or atoms, molecules of titanium dioxide and oxygen. I did call it Olympus Mark I because it was around the time of the Olympics. So I don't know, I kept thinking about it and I wanted to try and channel those into some custom levels. So now if I hit save and play, you get this. This is a little bit weird. And this is perhaps not a fantastic level to show off. But this level was probably the culmination of several hours of just fiddling and trying and just experimenting. So this first reactor basically extracts the copper, makes the oxygen gas, sends it out. This crazy complex route of pathways makes copper tin pairs and then aligns them into this weird plus shape. And then the tin, this guy reforges scrap tin into the titanium dioxide and then the tin atom. Basically, long story short, designing the solution took many hours, over a couple of days, I believe. And even now, I'm not sure it's that great of a level, to be honest. So I guess the point I'm trying to get at is there's only so much I can teach you guys about making your own levels in a video. But my biggest advice after just showing you guys how all these things work is to just experiment. Play around with it, see how it works, you know, just play with it to your heart's content, you know? That's the best way to learn, really. So probably was not the best way to end the episode, especially because I kind of lost my train of thought halfway through, but that was more or less a quick start guide towards making your own levels, how to export their code out of the game to give to friends, to share online, and how to import the codes from other users' levels into your own game so you can try and solve them. So, with that, I think the series is over for now. Don't worry, starting next week I have a new series on its way that will take SpaceChem's time slots. I might even up the uploading rate to maybe 3 times a week instead of 2 times a week, but we'll see. So there will be a new game coming along next week to fill the void. So with that, thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you had a great time, because I know I did, reliving one of my favorite puzzle games of all time. I really hope you all had a great time watching, and I really hope you all have great days ahead. I will see you all in the new series, and farewell for now.